I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup Studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 3, recorded on March 2nd, 2017. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths Finder themes, one theme at a time, and today's theme is deliberative. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room. It's available for you right below the main video window. Just look down there. There's a chat room, and it'll say log in, bottom left-hand corner. Click that, and then choose the guest account. Put your name where it says guest. Take those numbers out of there, too. Put your name in where it says guest, hit submit, and you'll be in our chat room. We'd love to get your questions that way. Best way to get those in. You can also pop that chat window out if you'd like. If you have multiple monitors, you want to move it to a different part of your screen. There are two red boxes upper right-hand corner. Just click on that. Pops the chat out. Chat's very important to what we do. We try to monitor that as we go along, and we'd love your questions. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, we do that too. Contact us here at Gallup. Coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video, both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening. Imagine that, offline listening, like we were joking in the pre-show about using pens and paper. Offline listening, you can catch that. All the links to do everything there is over at our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Micah Librant is our host today. She's my favorite learning and development consultant. Oh, I didn't change that script, Micah. My favorite workplace consultant now here at Gallup. Great to see you, and welcome to another Theme Thursday.
Thanks, Jim. Great to be here. I'm so happy we're back. We were off last week, and it's just my week was not quite the same. I'm thrilled to be here talking about deliberative.
Yeah. Hey, let me say really quick, big week last week. We were off for a reason because Gallup celebrates year-end in the coaches group. Got the opportunity to congratulate me on the MVP award that I won for the Omaha Riverfront. I shared that with one of our benefits directors as well as co-MVPs. And many of you, almost 500 of you, said thank you and all kinds of nice things. And so I figured it'd be a great opportunity. If you're listening to this 2 years from now, it won't matter as much. But thank you for you guys and all the nice things that you said in Facebook. I appreciate that. Micah, a big honor to be able to, through this medium, this webcasting medium that we have, to make a difference in the coaching community. And I just appreciate everybody out there.
You know, Jim, I think that in 2 years and in 200 years, it's going to matter just as much. So let me be number 501, just to take 1 second away from our regular scheduled programming and just say thanks for all you do. You guys, Jim was our MVP at our awards last week. And I think a lot of it has to do with playing to what you do really well, you know, focusing on your strengths, being courageous enough to say, I see something that can happen and I've got the talents to do it, and stepping into it. So congrats, buddy.
Thank you. I'm a little bit of a ranger in all this thing, trying to get all these things, these parts put together and making sure our community stays. You know, I can't sleep at night, literally, because I have these little red ones on my phone of new messages, and I am just like, I do not anyone to have an answer go or a question to go unanswered. So it's just tons of fun of what I get to do, and of course, like you said, get to play to my strengths. Today, Micah, we're talking about deliberative. I have none of this, so we're gonna have to learn from Aaron. Let's introduce our guest.
I also have no deliberative. It's actually number 34. I joke that a lot of themes are number 34 for me, but this is deliberative actually is. And I always, you know, I thought I understood deliberative until this week when I was doing a pre-call with our guest, Aaron, and light bulbs just came on everywhere. So I can't wait to get to hear about deliberative from him. And I think what he does is he espouses the beauty of this executing theme in a way that's super successful. So Aaron, he's an entrepreneur on his own, and we're thrilled to have him here. Hi, Aaron. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Micah. I'm honored, and I'm well prepared for this, as it turns out.
Fantastic. Hey, Aaron, can you just say a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you're connected to strengths?
Sure. So I am a digital marketing consultant. I specialize in direct response advertising, meaning everything we do has an ROI or calculatable, measurable, quantifiable impact, right, in terms of sales, as opposed to brand advertising. I've been doing this for about 10 years. I got started as a loan officer back in 2005. It kind of like worked my way through. The leads weren't that good, so I kind of figured out how to generate them myself, went through management, became a consultant, and kind of doing my thing ever since. Recently, I built a team. We're up to 11 now, like an agency team, and I do a lot of marketing consulting, and I work kind of like that. So that's my background. How I got into strengths.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, how I got into strengths was about a year and a half ago. I was introduced to a company that you may be familiar with, 34 Strong. So those guys over there, Brandon and Darren, if you're here, hi guys. And they introduced me to StrengthsFinder, which quite honestly I thought was a load of crap in the beginning. No offense. Like I just was like, oh my gosh, does the world really need another assessment? Like there's so many out there. Like I'm a color, an animal. Do we really need an assessment? But they're just like really insistent about it, and they had this like kind of calm like assurance in the product, and it wasn't like, hey, come drink the Kool-Aid, or hey, you need to do this to understand it. But it's just like, hey, try this. And I tried it, and it just blew me away. Like the depth of the insight. Like I had nothing call me out like that and say like, oh, or give names and explain like my behavior that I've been doing my entire life. It just blew me away. And I just became a believer in that second. I have since like made all our vendors and our employees take it. And I have gone on to work with many different strengths coaching and consulting firms. It's just a wonderful benefit because each one I work with has a little bit different approach, and I get to learn through osmosis from all of them. So I'm in a wonderful position. And we're heavily investing in strengths.
Awesome. Hey, Aaron, I appreciate you being here. Micah, we've got some work to do as we're building these Theme Thursday shorts with this. So as we dig in, let's get over to the companion guide. And would you walk us through those pieces in the companion guide for our short?
Absolutely. So season 3 really is all about not just talking about what is deliberative, but what does it look like in a leader? So in a moment, you'll get to hear that from Aaron, but I just want to tee us up. So deliberative by itself, really the definition is about taking great care in the decisions that you make. It's an executing theme. So it is about moving things forward, but moving them forward in the best way possible, in a way that reduces risk or sort of avoids potholes. Sometimes when I'm thinking about deliberative, I think about if you have a favorite mapping software. So if you go to Google Maps, for example, or maybe you use TomTom, and you go through and you'd say, okay, well, here's where I want to get going and here's where I'm starting from. Somebody with deliberative isn't only going to look at the entire picture, but they might want to instead look step by step. And as they're going through step by step, before they take that first step, they're looking for potential pitfalls. They're looking for, how do we make sure that we are confident once we start moving that it's going to be the absolute best way forward? So when you think about deliberative, if you look at the top of that companion guide, you read a little bit of that expanded definition. You see words like careful, vigilant, private even. The world is an unpredictable place. And I think we also talk in this definition about having that whisper of risk and that whisper of risk assessment, rather than living in a place where you just calm those risks. Somebody with high deliberative has the courage to let those risks be talked about, to process that risk and think about, how do we incorporate the whole picture, not just the possibility of everything that can go right, but alongside that possibility of, how could we trip, and bring it together in a way to communicate the compassion, the care, the trustworthiness of making a good decision. It falls into that executing domain, which I think is really important for us to understand. Very often I will describe it, and the words that I use sound a lot like a strategic thinking theme. And I do think that it definitely could jump into that domain pretty easily. But at the end of the day, deliberative wants to get things done. And so I think, what does deliberative look like in a leader? Well, it might sound like this. It might sound like, I raise the standard of quality in my organization by ensuring our actions are vetted and thoughtful. Or it might sound like, I increase productivity by limiting wasteful action. I think it looks like streamlining, like processing. It's cautious and full of care. I typed the word careful, and that wasn't quite what I wanted. So I deleted it, and I instead wrote the word care-full, F-U-L-L, because it is just brimming with, I think, desire to execute something of high quality and something of low risk. As an individual, deliberative might mean that you are assessing your next move cautiously and with certainty. As a leader, I think it's about creating, supporting, and maintaining systems that will do that for you. So, systems that limit haste, systems that limit mistakes. Those might be actual systems. They also might just be the practice or the habit of asking great questions, or of giving new processes or new ideas the due diligence that they deserve. I think that deliberative takes a lot of courage. That when you allow that deliberative to play and to really light your work on fire, that sometimes it takes courage to be the person who raises your hand and says, wait a minute, guys, we need to think about this. It might not be always the most popular thing to do. And leaders with great deliberative, I think, aren't worried about that. Or at least they maintain that worry with an air of certainty. So being able to say, doing something right and doing it well and doing it with limited risk is better than just jumping in and diving toward having to do things 5 or 6 times. I think I love the theme. In the theme definition, we actually use the word outstanding decision maker. I think that's who wouldn't want to be known as being an outstanding decision maker? So ways that you can think about expanding the reach of your deliberative if you're a leader. I think about how do you hone that? How do you polish that natural talent and really allow that talent to live out as a strength? One way might be to find your best system and then to trust that system. I caution myself from saying trust your gut to anybody with deliberative, because what probably speaks to them more is trust the judgment that your gut has told your brain to have. It's not jumping from a place of empathy. It's not a place of command. It really is trust your system. So if your system needs to be speaking with subject matter experts, then do that every time, and maybe think about honing the way to have those subject matter experts at your beck and call. Maybe your system is more about looking up data or comparing to your competitors, or benchmarking some scores, or even beta testing a new idea. Then create that system and do it in a way that I think you can fine tune it so that the system itself can be something predictable and something that you go back to. And then allow yourself to trust that, even if you find that it's going to be an unpopular decision, to slow things down. The truth of it is there's a lot more achievers in the world than there are folks with deliberative. And so sometimes that need to complete things can be a louder need than the need to slow down and do things in a way that mitigates risk. So allow yourself to realize that there's power in the fact that deliberative is not super common, and know that we need that voice. If you've got that whisper of hesitance and it's coming from a place of certainty and caution versus just a place of fear, then find the best ways to communicate that. You might do that by really getting excellent at asking great questions. So you're not going to teach your followers to also have deliberative. It's not something you can inject in people, but I think you can bring that deliberative outward through great questions. Questions like, what are the risks that we've already thought about? Or have we considered this? And you might find that you need to introduce those questions before you say it. We don't want it to come across as pessimism, but it is a real, I think, practical relationship with the things that could go wrong, as well as the things that can go right. So find a way to introduce a line of almost coaching and mentorship, or a line of questioning that helps build your brand as somebody who's an excellent decision maker, and also helps influence other people to think about taking a little bit more care in their decisions. I also coach folks with high deliberative to focus on, when are you feeling the most confident in your judgment? Maybe it's with think time. Maybe it's with quiet time. Maybe it's with experience. I think it's really important to perhaps even look to your other themes and personalize that awareness of when you feel the best confidence within your own judgment. When do you feel like you're ready to stand on what you're about to execute upon? And then figure out ways that you can go there more often. We also take a look at how can deliberative, along with the rest of these themes, provide the needs that followers have. So in a leader, followers need trust, they need stability, they need compassion, and they need hope. And I'm going to ask Aaron for how he does this in a moment. But first, to just isolate deliberative. Deliberative by itself can create trust by understanding sensitivity. I have yet to meet someone with deliberative who's, I think, super open at the drop of a hat. It takes a little bit of I think, creating trust with somebody with high deliberative. So don't be turned off by that. It is because I think there's a great care for sincerity. That's almost the relationship aspect sometimes of deliberative. So you probably handle sensitive issues pretty well because you don't just jump into them. And I think polishing or improving the way that you can even handle delicate situations is certainly a way that you can build your trust so that people know that you're a leader who doesn't just take things lightly, but who, can properly give delicate situations the thought that they need. A leader with deliberative can provide stability by creating predictable systems to mitigate risk or to assess risk. Think about walking in and having a great idea for your leader and already knowing that you're going to have to present maybe some backup data, or that you're going to have to give them a certain window of time to really consider it. Or that if you're on a team with somebody with deliberative, you understand that they are going to give you something better to jump into if you focus on that system first. A leader with deliberative may show compassion in the way that they share praise. Typically, folks with high deliberative are not quite as effusive with praise as maybe somebody with high positivity, high activator, high communication. And so understand, if you've got great deliberative, that when you do share praise, people are going to be hanging on your every word, and maybe make a big deal of it. Don't force yourself to be sort of rampant with praise, or to be a little bit more too giving. It's not the point here, but the point is, when you do give praise, understand that it is a rare and precious gift. Treat it as such, and know that people are clamoring for what you put your stamp of approval on, because you are such an excellent decision maker. And finally, I think leaders with deliberative can inspire hope by being a little bit proactive. Allow us to have a peek into the mind of what you've already processed and what you know is coming. Because it's an executing theme, chances are your deliberative is always doing something. You're always deliberating. You probably have something that you're working through right now. So think about, how can you talk about what you've already worked through but maybe haven't yet come to fruition, or what you've already decided to take action on but haven't even yet started. And allow yourself the stability to talk about those things you've already vetted, so that you can paint a picture for your followers of where you're going, and they know with certainty that it's a place that you're excited and confident in going. That's my quick overview about deliberative in terms of what does it look like for a leader. Now I want to allow Aaron to sort of run with this and personalize it and add his other top 5 themes and really tell us what it looks like. So Aaron, could you just tell us what all of your top 5 are, so that when we're listening, we can listen for some of those theme dynamics?
Aaron, don't forget, I need you to unmute. Remember, I muted you. Sorry about that. There we go. There we go.
Okay.
Yep. There we go. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, Micah. So my top 5, and it is a rare top 5, I'm told, is command, context, futuristic, self-assurance, and deliberative. So deliberative is actually my number 5.
I love it. Excellent. So what does deliberative look like for you? What does it look like day to day?
Yeah, I'd love to bring some kind of color to this. So, like, if I could give you any like visual metaphor to contain deliberative, for me, is I think of it absolutely like, I've heard like minefield, I've heard, risk, calculating, I've heard a lot of different visual metaphors. I think I have a really good one, and it's a very simple one. It's just of a jury deliberating. Like literally, like 12 jurors in robes in a room, small room behind the courtroom, arguing. That's how it is in my mind. Like things goes in, the doors close, and then hours later they come out with a verdict. That's exactly after the lawyers present their arguments, after the witnesses, after the evidence, right after everything is heard, then the jurors go deliberate and they come out with a verdict. That's what deliberative is like to be in an analogy.
That's great. I'm imagining a tribunal inside your brain.
It is exactly like that. And it's kind of like I say, like multiple personalities, but there's definitely different perspectives in there, each, clearly arguing, like, if it's a business decision, like, it's almost like I have, a client in there, and the client's perspective is represented, and then like my employees or, our strategic, and so it's like these different perspectives. They have to find a weird harmony in my head for it to kind of click and for me to be able to move forward. Otherwise I'm stuck. And if you have deliberative, you just have to get used to that feeling of like, oh, I'm just stuck on this. I can't work, I can't execute. I am just locked at this stage until I get to the next thing.
How do you do that? Do you have to feed those jurors? Do you find that time helps, or what do you do when you get stuck?
Well, let me give you another analogy, right? This is just coming to me on the flow. Like, if you remember the Panama Canal, right? So like, how does the ship cross the Panama Canal? So it's through a series of locks, right? That's how a ship crosses land, right? It comes into the series of containers. So the ship drives in, the water's low, they pump the water, the ship goes up, then it can like float to the next container. And I think it's kind of like that. You have to be, if you're deliberative, and like you said, alluded to in your overture, you absolutely have to understand like what's your decision-making process, right? And you have to follow that because you're deliberative, and this may manifest in like a gut feeling or like a unconscious kind of like a sense, right? Sixth sense kind of a thing. It may rise up and physically block you from moving to the next step without you getting that required thing, be that advice or input or research or analysis or whatever it is you need to like move to the next stage. You will get blocked unless you pay attention to that and honor that.
What's the benefit when you get it right?
The benefit of getting it right is you're just absolutely sure that you've done the right thing. Like a deep sense of satisfying, like that was a good decision, and you see it reflected to you in the world. Like I have some other interesting themes. Like I have context and futuristic, which I really feel like they really feed this theme, because it's like when I'm deliberating, I'm like, okay, well, what was the context? And my significance is my number 8. So I'm like, what's the significant context of what's happened in the past to this decision, right? What are the future risks?
So what does it look like when you're leading other people? How does deliberative affect your leadership?
Well, that's interesting. And until, I guess, I actually hadn't thought about it acutely until we had that conversation the other day. Thank you for that. I was like deliberating on that. So I suppose that, so the question is like, how does it affect leadership in general? Is that the question?
How does it help you? Yeah. How does it help you lead other people?
How does it help me lead other people? So it's not obvious, it's kind of like a deliberative leader, I feel like, is that leader where if they've done their job correctly, nobody really can tell anybody's done anything. It's kind of like the ghost in the shell, right? Like they're the ones, grabbing you off the ledge right before you fall off, right? They're yanking you back you're about to, and our brains don't often think about like what we didn't experience, right? They're more like, they more like to remember like what happened, or you know what I mean. So I feel like a deliberative leader might kind of like be understated here, might be underappreciated, but they're like systematically checking up on things. They're building environments, and I almost want to say context, but they're building environments or systems to protect their people and get everybody going where they need to go safely.
Aaron, how do you know when you're in a leadership role and your followers are locked in? How do you know that? I mean, how are you getting that sense, that feedback from them that you're using the deliberative correctly in that situation?
That's a good question. So, like, if they're locked into a course of action.
Yeah, well, how do you know in the feedback? As leaders, we crave feedback oftentimes. Not all of us, but many of us crave feedback from our followers. How do you know when you've got that deliberative just right for them in that situation? What kind of feedback mechanism, or what are you using to get that feedback from them? How do you know?
That's a good question. So I test for like a way of thinking, right? And, just for me personally, in my organization, I cannot abide with careless thinkers, right? People that just charge into things without considering the possible, like, ramifications or their teammates. Well, look, they've got to figure that out, right? If we were in the military, right, people were just shooting off like, I'm going to go do this. They'd get war canceled out of there, or they get shot or killed or whatever, right? So I imagine it's sort of, well, there's my command in there. It's like the military, right? But I cannot abide by that type of person. So I test to answer your question, I test for thinking. I test their thinking. Give me a plan. Let me understand the data behind the plan. Let me test your thinking. Let me, test your thinking, and then let's watch your experiments. Like, how did your results align with actuals? And is that working correctly? And if it's not, you got a problem. And if it is, then things are moving pretty well, I think.
Can you talk a little bit about deliberative as an executing theme? You mentioned that out of your top 5, it's the only one that falls into that executing domain. So how does it help you get things done?
How does it help me get things done? Well, I would say it's the only way I know how to get things done. I have a ranger is not an executing theme, is it? That's more of a strategic influencing.
A ranger is executing, but that's okay.
It is okay. Well, it's my number 7. So like sometimes I was just trying to think like, what's the difference between reaching down into a ranger versus deliberative, and I find they're like synergistic, but specifically deliberative. It helps. How does it help me get things done? If I'm mindful of the process, it's actually fantastic because I can have a lot of stuff in my head. Like it's huge, like all the different things. And as long as I'm aware of kind of like where they are, and as long as I'm managing that, I can have a lot of irons in the fire at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense. So it can help me get a lot of stuff done. I have more bandwidth and more capacity, I feel like, than a lot of people, because of the little compartmentalized way that my head works. So it can actually prevent me from being overwhelmed, and under pressure, it actually really clarifies my thinking. And I don't know. It's kind of like this systematic way of thinking. It's very effective for like certain types of thought work, like consulting and strategic thinking and that kind of stuff.
Aaron, what kind of advice would you give for a leader if you're on a team and your peers, you're a leader among your other peers, and we're not all built that way, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned, both Micah and I are lean towards action, quick movement. We'll
That's
go. Right. It's fire, fire, fire. It's not even ready aim. We just fire, fire, fire. Oftentimes, maybe that's just me. What kind of advice would you give in a peer relationship with people on what's the best way for us to work with you? I mean, where's your sweet spot in leadership, and what's the best way for us to work with you?
Well, what's funny is like, I like the contrasting. What I love, Jim, about StrengthsFinder is like, as you get into it, you realize everybody is like unique and beautiful, and like their combination of talents just makes them like a unique and individual gift to you. If you look at them like that, it's very easy to look at people and be like, that person stresses me out or annoys me. But then if you think about, okay, this is like how they are, it's different, right? And I think with deliberative, you really have to think like, okay, these people on your team, like, they didn't get there by accident. You hired them or inherited them, or you're stuck with them for the most part, right? Like, replacing people is really expensive. You're just going to have to quit your whining about like, it's not a perfect environment. You're just going to have to get down, figure out what wires them, what motivates them, what risks. Like, okay, look, if they're a fast charger, if they're an activator, great. You don't have activator. You're going to take months before you ever do anything. Let these people get out in the field, get the momentum, and ratchet them back if you have to. Or give them like a bumpers in bowling. Like, give them an environment, give them an environment to do some damage, and but give them the parameters. Like, support them in a way that like makes sense for them individually. And in your system, if you reach in there, you've got a big system. You're the systematic dude, or woman, and you have if anybody, you have the capability, to support them in an environmental way.
Yeah. And Shauna asked a question from the chat room. She says, I'm wondering if deliberative as a leader can come across as micromanaging, and how do you handle that? Aaron, have you ever been seen as, or gotten the feedback as, you're too much, of a micromanager, or maybe even the right level? Because there is a great level of micromanagement. In my leadership, I tend to move very, very quickly, and I err on the side of not enough management sometimes, and I need to come back and give people more direction because I gave them none. Basically, I'm like, hey, let's go, and I'm already gone. Exactly, I'm already gone. I'm looking behind me like, hey, why aren't you following me? But in your situation with Deliberative, have you been accused of being a micromanager? And or give us some idea of as she asks, can it come across that way?
I think that's a great question, and I don't think deliberative by itself is micromanaging per se. I think that deliberative hates risk, right? So if you're doing, where you can get into this, where I've had trouble is if I've had people where I've talked to them and I've said, look, I don't like how you're doing this. If you do it again in the future without mitigating the risks, I don't like it. And if they're just not getting it, and I have to spend a lot of time like explaining, I get really frustrated. And I have noticed a pattern where I will micromanage. But the odd thing is like it sickens me, and I feel so bad because like I don't. And maybe it's my command. I just want to be like, "Womp! Here's what we're doing." Like general, go. Maybe I don't know how that plays into it, but I don't want to micromanage people. Like my ideal situation as a deliberative leader is like, here is the system, here are the parameters, here's the calculated risks, here's the risks you can take or not take, here's, like this protective cocoon to operate in. Just go get your shit done. Don't even talk to me, pardon my French.
I want to pull out something you said that I just think is really cool, and it's this idea of creating an environment or creating a system. And for those of you who haven't caught this yet, let's talk about the fact that Aaron has context and futuristic in his top 5. So we're looking, it's almost as if you have looked to the past, looked to the future, and then worked backwards to pave a road. And that road is where everybody can play to their own best self. And then you add the fact that you're, strengths-based manager. And so you're really tuning into what's beautiful and powerful about each person. It sounds like your deliberative, instead of micromanaging, just sets up the great like envirodome, where people can play in a safe way.
Yeah.
Well, and stability, right? Micah, you mentioned that in the the opening segment when we think about the stability, it creates systems to mitigate the risks, and that in itself creates this very, very stable, and I think the word I was looking for was predictable, right? A very predictable, right? So Aaron, for you and your leadership, you want to give people very predictable scenarios, and it might even be multiple predictable scenarios. In other words, it's not always just one thing, right? You may say, hey, I think I heard you just say this. It could be this, or you could do this, or you could do this. I've thought through all three, right? And now I'm giving you these, I've thought through these actions. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, it's kind of like I want to understand their thinking, like that kind of relates back to like how you build trust. It's like, okay, bring me a plan for what you want to do, and let me ask you some really, pointed questions about the plan. Like now, for example, if I was in consulting with a client, I'd ask these similar types of questions, but I can kind of consult with them and challenge them about their plan. Like, what about this? Have you thought about this? Have you learned from the past? That's where like you could really feed this thing, is you bring in your other strengths into the deliberative, right? Whatever they may be, and then you can kind of have this conversation like with them, like, hey, here are the risks of what you're doing, and that's really the insight you can bring to them, that creates trust, because it's sort of like, hey, if this goes right, I could be almost entirely hands off. I could be 100%. That's what deliberative can be like. You don't even talk to me, maybe like just once a week, or I want to be very hands off if things are going correctly, right? But if you're not calculating the risk, if you're not planning for contingencies, you're just playing poker and you're going live every hand, then we're going to have a problem, because you're screwing up my environment now, and you're potentially creating a bad example for other people too.
It sounds like a pretty high social standard. I think a lot of times we talk about the social aspect or the relational aspect of deliberative as being private and
Mm.
cautious. But I also think what you're describing here is it's high integrity.
I think ideally, yeah. I think it absolutely is. Yeah, deliberative, yeah, they just have a sense, I guess, like an honor or pride in the system that they create through people.
Mm,
And while it's not like command, getting done through people, it's definitely, for me, it's about, like, if you're getting things done, if you're a manager, if you're a leader, then you're having to get things done through managers and sometimes like their direct reports. So it's sort of like, how do you maintain the integrity of that leadership message as it goes down through the levels? Well, it better be really well thought out, right? Or you'll have a culture where right hand's doing left hand's not, that kind of thing.
mhm.
That's the risk you run.
Micah, I want you to think through. Aaron, I want you to think while I'm asking Micah this question. I want you to think about examples of how you've done this. But under the compassion of the needs of the follower, Micah, you said when you share praise, make it a big deal. It's rare and precious to many. Micah, can you think of some examples? And then Aaron, I want you to think of some specific examples of maybe where you've done that. But can you give some examples of that? Because we're really making a big emphasis on recognition. That's
Mhm.
one of our Q12 questions, and I think it's super powerful. So, Micah, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk quite a bit. The Q12 question is about, are you getting feedback that what you're doing matters? And I think that somebody with high deliberative can give that every single day. But I also think that when they give really purposeful, perhaps even formalized recognition, that it's going to have that same sort of depth and certainty and thoughtfulness that we're describing here. Think about it as describing the entire system, not just giving somebody a gold star. I've coached leaders with deliberative who because they're thinking all the time and they're processing things all the time, they tend to
Priority, yeah.
notice and be able to speak out loud about things that aren't working really
Ooh,
easily. They
yeah.
see it.
Oh, yeah. Without, yeah.
They see it. So I think when you do notice what does work, it's powerful because it's not just it's not just luck, right? So I think that you can give great recognition that doesn't feel like you were in the right place at the right time, or I'm giving you this prize to put a band-aid on something hard that you did. The rare and precious and really meaningful recognition that somebody with high deliberative can give, I think sticks with people because of, maybe it is because of that honor and integrity piece to it. And when I say make it a big deal, I kind of mean that literally. Commemorate something, write it down, find a stage, tap into your other themes, and figure out the best way that you can give that recognition, because it's going to be really thoughtful.
So, Aaron, that question to you: how do you give it? And then Judy asked a great question in the chat: when do you feel it's sincere when you've gotten it back? So, let's go both ways on that question.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting because I already thought ahead of that. So, I
Of
was in a
course.
relationship a couple of years ago with an ex-girlfriend, right? And one of the things, like, she kind of accused me of is that I never gave, she how these things kind of come out, right? You have she kind of quote unquote accused me of not being appreciative, like, kind of like, is like the saw was like, well, you never really appreciate anything I do, and it took me like years to figure out what she was talking about. Finally, I'm like, no, it's not that I don't appreciate you. It's like I just can't give it every day. I can't give it every hour. I can't appreciate everything single thing you do verbally because it doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm lying to you. It doesn't sit right in my gut, and
Because you wanted it to be significant? Is that why?
I want it to be sincere. I want it to be authentic. I want to really mean it. I can't look you in the eye and tell you that I appreciate something if I don't really feel that way. That's sickening. I can't act like that. That's out of alignment. And that's this challenge that deliberative has with this area. It's really thorny, right?
Yeah.
And your people need recognition. They need, to be shown compassion. Like, how do you do that? And that's really.
So, what's the best way you give it? Like, when you're at your best and you're giving it, what's that look like?
Well, I think it's like, you can give shouts out and stuff like that. When things are working really well, and I think telling why is really satisfying. So rather than, for me, what's worked really well is like people kind of like put up with like not getting a lot of praise, is if they get praise, if it's satisfying, they'll like crave it, right? If I just said, okay, you're doing great, good job, Jim, Attaboy. That's different than, you know what, Jim, that project you turned in, I gave it to you with not enough time. I was blown away that you completed it. 2 of your people were sick. You did it in crazy conditions. The risk said you couldn't complete it. You did it. The client was ecstatic. I'm in love with that. That's amazing. Keep that up and you're going to get a raise. Big difference, right? I've deliberated all the different ways why that was important or significant. And I gave you almost like a treatise or an analysis. I backed up what I was doing and I gave it to you in a very, thought out way, and that sort of makes up for like not getting it all the time, I think. Significant and deep versus shallow and frequent.
So there's a question here that is, people do need to hear it and they need to hear it often. We know that when you get affirmation that the work you're doing is landing well, you do better work. And so if you're somebody based on your strengths or your upbringing or anything who doesn't feel like in their gut they can give sincere praise every day, create a system. Maybe Great Deliberative says, I'm not the right person to be doing this, but I know you need it. And I'm going to make sure that you get it in a different way. It doesn't have to come directly from you every single day.
Right. And one other thing, so like one thing that actually tripped me up a lot is I noticed this is important. Like you have to, as a leader, you have to give feedback. You just have to, right? And it's easy to give negative feedback, 10 times easier maybe than to give positive feedback. But, why is it hard for a deliberative leader to give positive feedback, right? Well, a lot of times you might be afraid of, the risk, there's a risk, right? The risk is you might compliment a behavior, but that behavior might actually be turned out to be the wrong motivation or unsuccessful. So like you're scared or cautious of sending the wrong message. So it's like, how do you manage that? Well, one tip I have is like, I note this stuff down. So I keep notes and then I work with our, HR person and we have a systematic way of tracking and noting this stuff. So when I need to like reference, I go reference my notes or I reference their HR file, and it allows me to be more intentional about how I give recognition, more systematic. So it's not off the cuff. Don't feel pressure to give off the cuff feedback just because people want it. That's not okay. Give it.
Well, you probably don't give off the cuff anything. So
No.
if we narrow our focus on recognition as having to be the guy who walks around the office and gives everybody a fist bump, then we eliminate a lot of people's access to it, right? That's not you. That isn't how it works.
Don't try to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So you've talked, I think, quite a bit about compassion and you told great, sort of alluding to how do you create trust. Was there anything else you thought about in terms of stability or hope or those other needs of followers and what they look like for you with Deliberative?
Well, stability, I think that's just about like you kind of, like you said, you can't delegate your strengths. So it's like you can ask for, critical thinking from your managers, right? Your direct reports, but you can't ask for them to be deliberative. If they're not, you're going to be the one that goes into the jury. But you could, for example, like a jury trial, ask them to present their arguments, ask them to mitigate the risks, right? Present evidence, produce facts, present witnesses, right? And then you, as a service to them, go into deliberations and come back with a verdict. That's a great way of doing it, right? Basically, the other kind of concept is with hope. You can help them to kind of do a reality check. Where I thought about this one too. It's like it's really difficult to. It's like, how do you get across hope? Like deliberative is all about risks, right? And when things go wrong, how do you how do you inspire hope? It's not very hope inspiring. It's kind of like a wet blanket, right? Well, with hope, like you can kind of help them after they crash and burn, right? Like, so after they tried something, they had an experiment, it failed, and they're like, they're weeping. You can console them and you can say, look, it's not your fault. It's the environment. It's like we tried to mitigate these risks. We did a bad job. We'll do better in the future. We'll learn, we'll do better. It's not your fault as a person. The system let you down. You can give them this message of like, hey, we're all in this together. And that's a way you can give hope. I had to really reach for that one, but
I like that though. I struggled when you first started saying reality check, because my first thought was, wow, is reality and hope two things that don't get along? But then brought myself back to a definition of hope that our good friend Shane Lopez gave us, which is just believing that tomorrow is going to be better than today and that I have the ability to make it that way. And I think your deliberative, that systems or that environments check can help people see their options to move forward, and maybe in a calm way that's been thought out, that is about reality and not about something pretend or flowery, but that ability to say, okay, we need to try a different way forward. And here's a way that I'm certain will help us get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it helps you kind of see, like, they can't see all this stuff. You have this like radar or vision, of the puzzle or the maze that they don't see. They're down in there. You're the general at the top. They don't see these, they can't see this, and you can give them that perspective. And that can be, hugely consoling when people oftentimes take failure very personally, just take them aside and say, look, I don't know that I could have done any better, or anybody could have done any better. Just as if it's not important, like what's important is that you learn from this and you understand why what happened and you fix it. You have a systematic fix moving forward.
Mike, I mentioned early on, there's times when, deliberative is very low for me, and I need to kind of bring it out because I know it needs to be a part of systems. Like as a leader, it's really important we provide stability to our followers. And I can't use that as an excuse. Like, oh, I don't have deliberative, or I don't have consistency, or, some of those kinds of things. And so I have found for me a little bit of activator or plus maximizer can look a lot like deliberative in the sense of, okay, let's think about if I've got things I need to do, and then how are we going to do those things in the best possible way? And so slowing down just a little bit and then thinking out through how do those processes work best for my followers and putting some of those things in place. Yeah, it doesn't come as naturally. And oftentimes it doesn't come intuitively. Like I don't think about that first. But as a person who doesn't have it, I can kind of overcome that in some ways by using those two to make it look like deliberative. So I think the key sometimes to understand as leaders that just because it's not there doesn't mean we can't manufacture it in some way. It doesn't mean we can't pull things together to make it look that way. You want to say something?
I think it's also defining what you really are aiming at. You're not aiming at turning up a lesser talent into one of your strengths. Right. What you're aiming at is creating stability. And you have access to stability through either a direct line to each of your talents or a combination of those talents into stability. So it's extracting that deliberative envy and using all that energy to say, how do I define what I'm really looking at? How do you make it something that you do or something that you create in other people? Because that then allows everybody to play. But I mean, after the last 48 minutes, I'm super envious of deliberative. So I'm going to have to catch myself doing that because I'm already wondering, how can I just take a dose of what Aaron's got and make my own world a little bit more careful, a little more certain.
Yeah. And I think it's a good reminder. Tom was talking a little bit in chat. We're talking about startups, and, there's always this, on the deliberative side, there's always this fear of getting stuck in analysis. And then on the other side, there's always the fear of going too fast without thinking it through. And I think we need both, right? We have to think through both of those scenarios. There's no excuses to say, well, I can just run out the gate as fast as I want, or I can think about it as long as I want. We have to have this in every situation. We've got to have this internal conversation with ourselves that says, okay, what do I've got? Where am I at? What am I good at? And how do we make this thing happen based on the situation and not get locked into some preconceived notions of who we are, who we aren't, right? I still have things as a leader. I still have things I need to provide my followers. And so how am I going to do that? And you're right, Micah, we are at the 48-minute mark. We do have to wrap this up. Any final thoughts? And thank our guest.
Aaron, thanks so much for giving us a light on deliberative that shows beauty and compassion and sort of the human side of really thoughtful execution. You've just done, I think, a great job of starting your own business, but also a great job of doing it in a way that's truest to yourself. And we're just honored that you would share it. Aaron, before we close, if you were thinking about mentoring somebody who also had deliberative and was a leader themselves, what kind of advice would you give them?
Whew. I would say number one, and I know like it's very positive here, like focus on the strengths, but like on the flip side, like don't let people rush you. Like just don't put up with it. Like if people rush you, explain. Don't just say I don't like to be rushed. Just say like, it's not my strength. I don't make good decisions under pressure. If I feel rushed, I'll make a bad decision. Then the regret might kill me. And I've made bad decisions in the past. I've definitely afraid of that. My strength is making good decisions. Don't rush me. I need space. I need space to think about things and make a good decision. That's how I work. And if they don't respect that, if they continue to rush you, then get those people, you know, you need to protect yourself from those people. Don't let people rush you. Don't be afraid to defend your systematic way of doing things. Develop it, you know, and make it work for you. If you can't articulate it, if you can't explain it to people, like, what good is it, right? You're just asking people to do what? Like, just put up with you because why, right? Explain, like, no, like, here's the way, you know, develop that, speak to that, you know, think about the environment. How can people get what they need from the environment, from their, you know, the surroundings, from the system? Like, how can you build the system every day? And how can you sort of like leverage what you've done in the past, you know, in a repeatable way. I know that's kind of a lot, but yeah, that's let that thing fly, you know, back up that gut feeling with data and action, and don't ever do things unless you feel absolutely good about them, if at all possible.
I don't think that's at all the opposite of focusing on the positive. I think that's a great example of how do you invest in that kind of talent. So thanks so much, Aaron. We just so appreciate you being able to put these thoughts into words and being an excellent poster child for what deliberative can look like in a successful leader.
Thank you. I hope I've given some like higher level stuff and not the basics. So I hope I was helpful to I help brighten someone's day.
You have indeed, Aaron, and we'll thank everyone. Great comments in the chat room as well. Appreciate you guys participating out there. Always great to get that instant feedback and some great conversations. Remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center. Just go to gallupstrengthscenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. If you'd like to be a guest blogger and you got a blog in your head, write it down and send it to us in an email. In the subject line, put guest blogger. Send that to coaching@gallup.com. Micah actually helps us with the blog, and the blog is rocking. So if you've got something you want to say, we are taking your suggestions. So we can't take them all, but we'd love to have you submit some. You can also catch the recorded and audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones. Everything's available on our coaches blog, redesigned topic and resource page. And there's also 2 new tabs for Theme Thursday and our new Builder Talent Tuesday. If you haven't caught that, Micah and I are getting together every other Tuesday to kind of build out the talents that are a part of our Builder Profile 10. And so if you're interested, we just released the very first kickoff, the season premiere episode today. It's in the blog right now, coaching.gallup.com. And if you want to get some great information, Rod Carr kind of goes through what it is and what it isn't and where it's at and all that great stuff. You can check that out on our blog today, coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, you can also see a list of all our courses that lead to that, including if you take the courses at the summit, July 17th, 18th, or 19th. This summer, 15% off. So head out there. It'd be a great time to come and join us, and come a little bit early or stay a little bit late. Take those courses. We'd love to have you out here for that. Don't forget, we also have other podcasts available for you. We have one called Call to Coach, and we have one based on Gallup.com from our I almost call him Commander-in-Chief. He would be very impressed if he knew I was calling that Editor-in-Chief. Frank Newport, called Polling Matters. If you want to catch those either on your iPhone or Android, you can just go to where you normally listen to podcasts. They both have podcast app available for you, and search Gallup or Polling Matters. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you share it with everyone. And thank you for joining us today. Aaron, thanks again. Micah, great to see you. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.